Hey, welcome to the sales training meeting. We're going to have this once a week, every single week. It's not going to be with the same person all the time or the whole group all the time, but we want to make sure that our team is, on point. I know that we have changed a lot from our previous sales system. Our previous sales system was a little bit more, I don't know, what's the right word? What would be the right word, Zach? Stringent or methodical? I don't even know if that's the right word, right? I think it was probably had more moving parts. And one of the things that I really, really love when Todd came and joined us is that even though it's not so completely far off from our original sales process, it seemed to be easier and flowed easier as well. And that's why we had some success with it. Zach, please jump in at any time if you agree, disagree, anything like that.
Yeah, I think Todd's made it come across to me, at least, the complicated has turned simple. And I think that's just because he speaks more of the layman's terms to me that I can understand and put to use. Whereas when I watch some of these bigger gurus on YouTube or the videos that you send me, sometimes they use terms or they're using terminology that's just a little bit harder for me to feel like I know how to implement it immediately. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, it totally makes sense, man. And I feel you. And so I had Todd. Todd, are you here? Okay, I don't think he is. I think he's still trying.
I'm here.
There you go. Okay. So I had Todd actually create a sales system, although I don't think that he really had a real, system formatted. I think most of it was pretty much just natural talent in his head, right? Is that fair, Todd, or not?
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And I still got to work on structuring what I sent you. I got to put more, like, when I went through with Zach, I kept it very short and simple and just kind of told him the philosophy behind it. I need to kind of put that philosophy on the paper so people can look at that and then see what we're thinking as well. I mean,
Okay, so let's do that. Let's talk about that real quick, man. Like, if you could just on a, like a high level, real simplistic, because the simple part is really what it's most important, right? So on a high level, how would you describe your process in comparison to, say, anybody else's?
it's a good question. I mean, I think just keeping it short, sweet, simple, and trying to sound as neighborly as possible as opposed to a professional. A lot of people want to sound real professional. I do my best to not sound professional, not in a like I'm gonna cuss or sound it like I'm not credible. But people want to talk to someone like they're just the guy next door, not somebody that's above them. Like I'm some big time investor about to steal their house. I think that's the script is kind of and the conversation is kind of designed for that. But also there's some specific word tracks that I've found over the years that just work really well. Like this getting the motivation out of them with the living situation. I've never heard anybody talk about that. And it's gold. You get the motivation out of them every single time from that one question.
Okay, that's super interesting. So let's table that real quick because I want to go back on that and talk about that. So you got getting the living situation. Well, what was that again? Getting the living situation.
It's the motivation out. So after a call, an intro, right? Then I immediately want to go into the living situation as far as who lives there, because that's going to immediately get the motivation out of them. So it's basically living situation, short open-ended questions, positive and negative. And what I mean by that is the living situation. So vacant, homestead, or rented, right? If it's vacant, that's pretty obvious. Okay. If it's rented, then they're going to go positive or negative once you ask those short questions. So say it's rented. So tell me about your tenant. How long have they been there? They take good care of the place. They are they paying you on time? Everything's good with them. They're going to go positive or negative. Oh, this person's terrible. Haven't paid me in 90 days. they're tearing up the house. Well, obviously that's a big part of their motivation, right? But if they go positive and tell you, hey, well, yeah, this is the best tenant you'll ever have. They've been there 10 years. They always pay on time. They're paying an awesome rate. They take great care of the place. Well, after they've spilled all that to me, I'm going to turn around and just say, man, that's sounds like you got a great investment. Why would you even consider selling that?
Yeah, you're going negative.
And then boom, it's like, I'm just asking them, why are you selling? But it's not in a confrontational way. They cannot get out of that question if you set it up right. And literally, there's no way around it. I've had people, high driver personalities that's usually the person that's easiest to corner because they're going to tell you, oh yeah, well, this is the best and this is the best. And then you hit them with that and they'll literally just choke on their words because they're caught. It happens every single time. So if you set that up, the motivation you get from them right away. And I like talking about that before even the condition of the property.
Dude, I love that. So you're getting motivation from living situation, right? Where we in the past would get motivation from timeline, right? Like we want to go figure out what their timeline looks like, which half the time's not true anyways, right? But yours is so much more in depth because you're playing chess with them to a certain degree. This is what I'm hearing. You're playing chess with them with a certain degree, letting them talk about how great the property is, and then just reversing it, going, hey, why would you even move? Why would you even sell this? And then it forces them to give you another reason why, not the true, but another reason.
Right. And you're also asking them like a friend. Like if your mother or your aunt was selling their house, you would ask them in the same way. Like, that's a great property. You have a great investment, a great tenant. Why are you even selling that? I'm looking out for you as opposed to just, well, what do you want for it? Well, why are you selling? People put up their guard. They know when you ask that question exactly what you're doing. They know. That's why you hear sellers all the time who are motivated sellers will say, oh, I don't have to sell, or, well, I mean, it's okay if it didn't sell right now because that's how they negotiate. They don't really know how to negotiate. So they're just trying to tell you, well, I'm not desperate. They just put up their guard when you ask them confrontational questions like, well, why are you selling it? But this is, you're on the table with them, as opposed to on the other side of the table asking them, well, are you sure you want to do this? Sounds like you got a good thing going here.
Okay. That's awesome. So one of the things, guys, what we want to do with this, right, is I'm a process person. I want to make a process out of things, or at least as much as possible, right? And this is going to be a work in progress. And what we really want to do is create a process that not only works on our sales team, but on our lead management, and then also our dispo. Okay. And so although this is just a rough outline, what I like to hear, especially from all three of those segments, are the biggest problems you're having. And then we could kind of talk about how to overcome objections, because the objections are always going to be relatively the same on every single situation, right? Like it might be presented a different way. I've said this for years. It might be presented a different way, but it's always relatively the same type of objection. So let's go through that right now, right? Let's go through just AMs. What's the biggest issues you're having right now with objections? Zach.
One of the biggest things I'll hear is I'll get through it, build good rapport, get to the sales funnel part. They give me a number and I'm like ready to move on that number. And I'm trying to lock them down. Like, okay, if I can get you this, you're ready to move forward type of thing. And a lot of times they'll get, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me see the contract and I'll let you know after I read it. And so I have a hard time like saying no to that because it seems kind of reasonable on my end of thing. And like, if I tell them like, hey, no, like it's policy, like I got to read it through with you just to make sure if you have any questions, like, I can answer them as they come. They're just like, oh, I just need the space to read it. And I don't want to push them on that because it looks kind of sus.
I know how I would handle it, but I love to hear what Todd says.
So I'm not like Mike in the fact, and I understand the psychology behind the face-to-face contract appointment, but I don't do that. Mainly because I feel like it's easy to come off as kind of needy and like very salesy. I don't, you can do it without coming off that way, but it's kind of hard. There's a thin line. And once they think, man, this guy's really, really putting the pressure on, it can turn some people off. But if you put them in a corner before you send it and basically get their commitment before you send it, it's really hard for people to ghost you or change their tune at that point, because because it basically means they're a liar. Like, they're a bold-faced liar, and nobody likes to admit that. But so your objection specifically is, hey, we agreed on a price, at least somewhat, right? And then, okay, I think I may be able to make that work, but let me see the paperwork. And no, I want to see it on my own before making a decision, right? That's what you're telling me, Zach? I'm asking you. That's what you're telling me? Okay.
Yes, a lot of times when I go to send paperwork, even if I've gotten that commitment, I mean, they'll just be like, okay, I'll read it over and I'll get back to you. And I'm like, well, hold on.
Yeah. I think, Tom, I would think about, first of all, what got you to there. Did you really touch every base before that? A lot of time when you're negotiating price and you're getting to that point, instead of going back and forth on price, I would much rather go back to the motivation, go back to what's going on. Like, oh, well, 60 doesn't work. That's insulting. I need at least 85. Okay, I understand. Can you tell me about, you mentioned this as far as condition wise. Can you tell me more about that? Okay. And you said your son, what's the plan for him? I'm just going to go back and hammer on those points because they're real more important anyways. And it may come down to it not even being the right time to go back and forth on the number just yet. So usually it's something before that that is causing that. But let's say you did touch every single base for a fact, and now's the time to close, and they hit you with that. I would ask them basically, okay, well, let me ask you this. Is there anything in that paperwork that is most concerning to you? Is there anything that, maybe you've seen before that you're concerned may be in there? Because ours is just a one-page document, is very simple and straightforward. If it says anything other than we're buying it for this said agreed price and we're closing on this date and it's straightforward, is there any reason why we can't move forward today? No. Okay. So unless there's something crazy on there that is alarming that we haven't talked about, then we're good to move forward today. Right? Like, I want to get them to verbally commit, like, yes, unless there's something crazy in here that says, I got to bring money to the table at closing, or I'm paying these fees or something like that, then yeah, I'm going to sign it right now. Okay, great. And we'll send it here in a little bit. It's a one-page document. It'll take you maybe 5 minutes to get through that. Call me if you have any questions or if you see anything alarming. Otherwise, I'll look around here in a few hours and I'm sure I'll see it signed in my inbox then.
Do you get a commitment on the price? Do you have any pull away when you accept or do you give an offer and they accept it? Is there any pull away there at all?
Yeah, well, so
I'm trying to tie it up as far as that's concerned.
So my whole thing is, I'm not giving an offer. I want to hear their number, and then I want them to convince me to get to that number. That's how you create the urgency, right? And if I am in a corner where I have to say a number, I just go back to the anchored price. Well, I want to hear your offer. Well, sir, we actually, Anna gave you this offer of $63,000, and I haven't been to your house, and I'm not, I haven't done all the homework, but we bought a lot of properties nearby. I'm pretty good at shooting from the hip, and that's a pretty darn good guess as far as where we would be. Oh, well, that won't work. Okay, well, hey, let's see what we can do. I mean, could you work with me a little bit? You know what I mean? And then maybe I'm going back to the story or going back to the condition, but now they're trying to close me, right? And so I may or may not know we already have a deal at that point, at that number, but now I'm trying to create the urgency. And right to where we get to that point where it's confrontation, like, all right, well, fine, then I'm out. I'm going to say, you know what? Maybe ask for photos at that point if I don't have them. Well, let's get the photos. Let me see if I can get to your number. Or if we have the photos, then I'm going to do the if I could, would you? And hey, you know what? Well, let me see. Okay.
If I could, would you?
If I could, would you? That's the saying. Okay. Well, look, Mr. Seller, I see you got to be at 80 grand. Look, me and my partner do everything together. And Zach, I would say the same thing. I would call Mike your partner. Me and my business partner do everything together. Let me touch base with him on this. I like the property. I think we're at least close. Look, if I can convince him to get to that 80 grand, is there any reason at all why we can't move forward today and get this done? No, you're telling me no. But what about, you said your son's there in the house. What's going on with him? I mean, he's going to move here. We're doing this. The U-Haul's coming next week. Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. So there's nothing else getting in the way if I can convince him to get you that 80 grand you're looking for. Nothing. Okay. You're sure? Because I'm kind of sticking my neck out for you on this one. You know? Okay. All right, great. Well, look, it won't take long. Give me an hour or so. I'm going to call you back with a yes or no. Then when you call him back and you're like, all right, well, you win. We'll do the 80 grand. Now what are they going to say? Like, they just confirmed with me 5 times that, yes, if you do that, I'm going to sign it right now. Like, they're deep in that corner. So, yes, they could say, oh, well, this came up, but then they're a huge liar. Like, huge liar. And nobody wants to be that guy. So when I send it, they've already said yes.
So I get what you're saying. You're saying, you got to set up the framework all the way in the beginning in order to avoid that objection at the end. Is that correct?
1,000%. And this is also how you, get rid of, well, let me think about it. Because you're the one that's thinking about it, not them.
Yeah, I had a big takeaway there because my best deals are always the deals that they gave me the number
every time,
and they're my best deals. And so, we've had so many iterations of how we want to give the offer and stuff like that. And we went through an iteration where one of my mentors is like, you need to give a bunch of offers. So we gave a bunch of offers, which also deleverages you sometimes. Because a really great point that, you told me, Todd, was that when you give an offer, it doesn't work for them. Anytime you call them, you're that, hey, that's the $150,000 guy, right? So why would I pick up right now? Because I'm trying to get more. But I love the way that you set that up, as far as like, going back to the anchor price as your primary base, right? And then forcing them to give a number. So I think that's something that, Zach, is that something that you do on a consistent basis, or are you still in the old, how we used to do it system?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of a transition right now because like I've been working with Todd and we've been trying to get that habit of going in and giving offers kind of out of my system. And sometimes it kind of trickles back in there where it's like, I just got to get them a number and I got to be where they need to be and they need to be, So I've been working hard to just try and pull their number out of him. And I've talked to Todd, we've listened to some calls where like, it hasn't gone well and it has gone well. And the deals that I get that are the biggest, like you said, are the ones that I can get their number out of them and make them convince me to buy it. And one of the things I also take away from when I listen to Todd's calls, something he does really, really well, is getting like what I call micro agreements all along the way of the call, which is something I'm also working on improving on. It's just little things like, oh, hey, you having a good day? Yeah, right. Oh, hey, we're going to do this. That's cool, right? You agree? Yeah, okay. And just by the time we're at the end of the call, when I'm listening to Todd's call, they had said yes 100 or 200 times. So when he's like, all right, well, we're ready to move forward, it's just almost second nature. There's like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, he makes them feel good about it. So another thing that I took out of that one, what Todd just says, that even when you came back and came to agreement, what was the first thing he said? First thing he said was like, "Hey, you win, right? You win. Like, I got the price," and so it's constantly making the seller feel like they're in charge, whatever.
Feel like they won.
It's not.
Feel like they won.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. Let's kind of look over this sheet really quickly here. Okay. So like I said, this is going to be a work in progress, right? So right now, first thing, they're special. Why are you calling? Okay. Love that. Like, and Todd, please jump in anytime if you want to kind of throw in some tidbits about these pillars, essentially, right?
Yeah. Well, I am kind of restructuring this a little bit, like I said, but we could definitely use it, obviously. I will say this because we got a lot of LMs on here too, and we're making a lot of cold calls. The intro isn't really on here because this is AM, but really, you want to make sure in the intro, I hear everybody with cold calling intros like, "Hey, is this John?" Or, "Hey, is John there? Hey, John, hey, how you doing today?" Your intro needs to be, "Hey, John, this is Todd. Hey, I was calling by 123 Main Street. Is that something you consider selling by chance? Or is that something you consider selling?" Straight to the point. I assume I got the right person. I get my message out. And then if they want to hang up on me, that's cool because they heard what my message was. But so many times cold callers will say, "Hey, is this John?" And they're like, "Another cold caller," click. And that could have been a deal if they knew why we were calling, but they don't know. Okay, so you got to get that message out and assume you have the right person and mirror their tone and also kind of say it backing up a little bit, if that makes sense. Like, if you sound a little bit like you're confused, it'll confuse them and just kind of stop them in their tracks. You know what I mean? Like, "Is that something you consider selling?" They're going to stop and be like, "Who is this? Is this guy live down the street? Or it doesn't sound like a telemarketer. Like, what's going on here?" And that's exactly what you want, is to just kind of stop them. You know what I mean? Because you're interrupting their day.
Okay, awesome. Let's go through this really quick, and then we'll go back to objections that like the LMs and Dispo are having, and see if we can help them out, right? So not too far different from what you're probably already used to a certain degree. This is obviously the AM script, right? And Todd, jump in if you see any changes that you have already thought about, especially when it comes to LMs. You know what I mean? How to get it going, just like you just did right there, right? So first thing, make you feel special. Why you're calling? Like Todd said, directly to the point. I can't stand people that call me like that. Is this Mike? Like right off the bat. So 100%. Confirming timeline. Dig into the story. So, Todd said that earlier. Like, this is where he really gets the motivation and sets them up. You know what I mean? And one of the things that I don't know if he highlighted in here, I think he did a little bit further down here, but one of the things that I loved about his process was that, what is their story? What's next? Like, if they don't have a plan, what's the plan? You know what I mean? They don't have a plan of what's next, then there's no real motivation there, right? And obviously, we're not going to buy from them. So that's something that, although it's pretty intuitive, that you would think that it's intuitive. Like, I've always talked about it because I don't know if you ever read Gap Selling. It's a big part of Gap Selling, where you got to understand where they are, where they want to go. But that's something that seems to be that really stuck out with you, listening to you quite a bit.
That's by far the most important question when they're a homestead seller. By far. Like, for an AM, if you don't know where you're going or what's next, I'm not about to talk numbers with you at all. It makes no sense. Because then you're the 150 guy, right? And then they have no reason to talk to you again because you're the 150 guy. But I'm just going to keep building rapport, gathering the facts, and getting a firm grip on their timeline and how that's going to work out. And then we'll follow up. It takes time. But then 6-8 weeks down the road, you talk to them and they say, you all will be here next week. Okay. Yeah. Hey, can you, I want to get 150. Now we can talk, you know? And that 150 before I knew was a little high, but I also knew that they weren't ready to sell. So of course their number's high. Now it is time to sell. I guarantee you they're more flexible.
Yeah, bro, that's powerful, man. That's super powerful, right? And I think that's a part that a lot of us do make a mistake on, right? We give the number too early in the sales process. And I think you nailed it right there, because you're right. When they're not ready to move, especially on a cold call lead, their number's always going to be high. So that's great. How can a lead manager navigate that? Same thing as I am.
That's tough. I would just make sure we at least ask the question, what's next for you? Where are you headed? What does that look like? Oh, you want to get some land. Where is it? Do you already have it? I don't think the LMs need to get too deep into it, but you do need to start asking those questions. This timeline question is a good one for LMs too, because it's part of it. We get leads sometimes. It's like, oh, I'm going to sell tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. Just give me $1 million for my property. I'll sell tomorrow, right? We hear that all the time. It's not really a lead. Again, I get it. It's just part of it. But I don't know how exactly we're asking the timeline, but this one question here, hey, Mr. Seller, assuming you get an offer and a deal that makes sense, when did you want to close and be done with the property? Right? So I'm basically taking away that objection before they say it, right? I'm not giving them the opportunity to say, well, just give me $1 million and I'll move tomorrow. No. Hey, assuming you get a fair number that makes sense, when did you want to trade keys for a check? That it makes all the difference throwing that in there. Then they'll tell you their real timeline, as opposed to, I can move next week. Don't know where I'm going, but I'll figure it out. Just give me $1 million.
Yeah, awesome. Lead managers, what are the biggest issues do you have right now in the sales calls or the sales process that Todd could help you out with? You know what I mean?
Sorry, I'm on mute. I'm sorry. Yeah, same thing as what Todd been telling about, like the timeline. Like they're telling they're interested, they're ready to sell, but it's really hard to um tell like when, like it's kind of like that question, like, but normally I try to ask like, what's your plan, like something like that. What's your plan, or what's your next step? Like if ever we give you this price, we're able to close this deal like 2 to 4 weeks, because that normally like we can close. So sometimes they said yes tomorrow, but then if I try to follow up still not interested, probably take a month or two. So I know they're just like not telling the truth, maybe.
Maybe
Like they're not really interested.
that's possible. That happens. Just always keep in mind, again, who lives there? Is it vacant, homestead, or tenant? And if it's homestead, just ask them, hey, well, where are you headed? What's next? Where are you headed? It's pretty simple. And you're asking it like, hey, sometimes I'll follow that up with, hey, well, what do you mean? Where am I headed? Well, hey, if we sign this contract, we usually close in a few weeks or so. And what if a few weeks come by and, you don't have a place lined up? I don't want to put you out on the street. That's the last thing I want to do. I want to make sure it's a smooth transition for you from this place to your next place. We got to make sure the timeline works out for you, because again, what if in a few weeks I'm ready to write a check, but you have nowhere to go? I want that to happen.
Makes sense. Yeah. And the other one, Todd, is like actually most of the time I'm dealing with, like if ever I called to most of the leads, they're actually telling me like I had a bad experience with an agent before, and I don't want to deal with an agent anymore, something like that. I don't want to deal with other. I'll just gonna list it by myself anyways.
Well, anytime anybody tells you an objection like that, you want to, any objection, period, you want to somewhat agree with them. Not tell them you're right. Your one apart house is beautiful, but you want to tell them that you hear and you understand where they're coming from, right? Like people, when you're negotiating the number, like on the AM side, this is so, oh my gosh, it's so powerful when you're $10,000, $15,000 away and you're like, hey, I get it. You know, you've had this in your family a long time. You want to make sure you get as much as you can out of it. I understand. I really do. I understand 1,000%. But due to XYZ, I really need to be here. That person is way more likely to say, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Other than, yeah, but whatever. I need to be at this number. They're like, oh, well, F you too. No, I'm good. You know what I mean? But if you just agree and tell them, hey, I understand. We hear that a lot. You know, there are a lot of bad agents out there, and I get it. Went off on that tangent, and I guess I didn't really even completely hear what your objection was. So I apologize. So they said they've had a bad experience with agents and what?
Yeah, I'd rather prefer to list it by myself or sell it by myself, something like that. Because I know that we're not like we like there's a lot of people calling them, right? So they have a lot of experience, bad experience, something like that. So they prefer to like sell it by themselves anyways.
Well, that's
Sometimes.
for us, right? Because that's what we do is buy from people like that. So I would tell them, hey, I get it. I hear you. Yeah, there are a lot of bad agents out there, and that is a lengthy process. But that's fine because you don't need an agent. You know, if you're selling to us, we make it easy. We'll just buy it directly from you.
You see how I pause on the lengthy process? So I thought that was really good as well. That you always want to sneak stuff in there like that, right? But so with that being said, did he answer your question, Naomi?
Yeah, I totally, yeah, I mean, it's really helpful. Sometimes I get it. Like, we really need to understand. Like, need to like understand them and like on what I mean their objections.
They need to understand that you're really listening.
Yeah, that we get them. So you just only need to agree with them.
I also would like to hear the story of what happened with the agent. You know what I mean? Like how they were burned. I always want to get as much of the story as possible.
Okay.
So, all right. So I know that this doesn't apply as much to Dispo, and we're gonna work on that, right? But Dispo, what is the most important thing with you guys? What are the biggest issues that you're having on the sales side that we could help you with?
Maybe we can touch base a little bit more what we were discussing previously about okay, I'm gonna give you this, but you also gotta take. Remember, Todd, that we were discussing that strategy?
Sales, man.
Yeah, because well, basically on the end side of the sales process, it's all about numbers for the end buyers. Some of them they don't like a deal because they just don't like the area or the numbers. They don't make sense for them. But there's always a buyer that we are going to find that the deal is gonna look appealing to them. So it's more on how once we get that that they're already interested on the property, how do we take them to the closing table?
That's a very loaded question. What do you
say? That's a lot going on there. You have anything more specific?
What's somebody that a buyer has asked you or told you that you're like, oh, snap, and just kind of threw you off? Maybe you weren't ready for or didn't handle as well as you could have.
Not really. Mostly is because we're like 10 grand apart. Like they're at 70, we're at 80, and we're trying to make a deal work. We counter, they're not there. So it's basically just like sales. Like how can we, like, should we sell them the deal? Like, or should we just play like cool? Like, okay, doesn't matter. sure how to.
It kind of depends on where we're at with the deal. You know, are we getting a ton of attention? We know we're going to sell it no matter what. Is this our only hope to get it sold? You know, those are two really different questions. But for the most part, Dispo, you guys have the goal. You guys have what they want. So it's not nearly as hard of a close. But I would just make sure everybody knows what we're doing as far as and how things are going. You know, like, hey, we've had a lot of showings on this. Things are moving really fast. We can tell. So no, at the moment we're gonna be set on our list price. It may even sell for more than that. But if things change, here, let me know in the next 24, 48 hours. And if it's not sold, maybe we can work with you. You know, something like basically like, hey, do what you want to do, but here's what we got. You know, make sure they know there's a lot of attention. If we have offers, you can tell them we have offers. But it's not as hard of a close.
It's a lot easier, truthfully. So creating urgency, absolutely. Every single one, I'm in a multiple offer situation. Even if I'm not, I have a lot of interest, right? Also, another thing that when you're talking to a seller, depending on the experience of the seller, right, is really going back to understanding the story, their story, like what are they trying to do with the property, right? So I never try to overly sell a property, but I will try to go ahead, man, what are you doing with this? Like, are you a flipper? Are you trying to flip? Are you trying to, you know, keep it as a rental or whatever the case is, right? If I have a hard time selling the property, then I will try to help them make sense of the numbers. Like, dude, this is still a deal for you because of X, Y, and Z. This is what you're trying to do. This, you know, and then like this will be a little bit more difficult for you because you don't understand the construction side of it. Because they can try to baffle you with the bullshit on construction. Like, it's going to cost me $90,000. Like, you know, what are you trying to do? Trying to keep it as rental? Why would you spend $90,000 on this, right? So, to Todd's point, I would 100% try to create urgency every single time. I'm assuming you're doing that, or are you or not?
Yes, of course. Even with the properties that they don't have much interest, maybe on MLS with realtors as well. But then it comes a time when we continue doing this price, if we don't get the offer that we want, and we created urgency, and now we're price dropping a property.
You're coming back with less leverage, is what you're saying, right? So what do you say then? I think Todd had a really good way of setting that up. What he just said is like, hey, right now we're getting some, you know, we're getting a lot of feedback on that, so we're probably not going to be around that range, you know. On the price drop, and going back to the same seller, are you still $10,000 off, or are you going back with the price that they originally wanting?
Sorry,
They would say at one time they wanted it at $100K. You had it at 110. We couldn't make it happen, so we're down. We had to drop the price. Are you going back over there before you drop the price to the guys that are around that range and telling them, hey, listen, hey, I think that we can make this deal happen at that number before you drop the price?
Usually we have not have that situation specifically on MLS. I'm talking about a specific situation with MLS and realtors. Because the situations that we've been having, they're like not 10,000. They're a lot. Like, they're like lowballing us. So to Todd's point before, it doesn't make sense like for them, like for us to go back to entertain those low offers like that they're like 40,000 lower. Of course.
Like, I don't even respond to that. And here's two things that'll happen. One, you'll never hear from them again, right? Or two, they'll come back and they'll always say, are you going to counter? You know, and as soon as they say it to me, they go, are you going to counter? I'm like, no, I'm not going to counter. Like, we're so far off, I don't even see a deal working. So is that your bada, right? So Todd, tell me if you have a different way of handling that.
No, it's a good way to do it. Somebody did that just the other day, right? Asked you if you're going to counter, and you could tell them straight up, but maybe I think we're just a little too far away. I would suggest just if you want to resubmit an offer, I'm happy to bring it, to my boss, and then maybe he can counter that. Always put it on your boss. That it makes it so much easier when you do that. Like, hey, that way they don't expect you to answer some questions. Some questions that real negotiators are going to ask you. You have an easy way out. What's the best you can do on this? Sorry, I have no idea. I'm just my job is just to market it and find a buyer. If you want to submit an offer, I would love to present it to my boss. Hey, are you going to counter? I was told we're not going to counter, but if you want to resubmit it, then I'll be happy to bring it to them. We're getting a lot of offers, we're getting a lot of attention on this. So if you are going to resubmit it, I would do it as soon as possible.
Noted. Talk.
Any other questions on the Dispo side? All right. So it's 45 minutes for 40 minutes. I think we hit quite a bit. We'll be doing this once a week. Is there anything that closes up? Is there anything that you guys want to talk about that we didn't hit? Todd, is there anything that you want to add?
I don't think so. I think it was a pretty good day one of this.
Okay. Yeah, we'll be refining it as well. And guys, help us out. I mean, as far as when you're going through a situation, write it down. Yes. And then present it to us, and then we could craft, the right response or the right protocol of handling it. Okay, because we're all going through something. So to just help us out as far as that's concerned. Okay. All right, guys, we all good?
Noted, Mike.
Awesome. Let's get some more contracts, guys. All right. There. Bye.
Thank you, guys.